you're delegating it to someone else. Does that make sense? You're taking away the responsibility from yourself. Okay? Any questions on that? So the requirements are the same as salah, with the addition of the body of the deceased being present in front. Number one. Second is the deceased person needs to be Muslim as well. Now, if a person is not there, is it permissible to do Salat al-Janazah for the absent person? According to the Hanabila, it is permissible. However, it should not be done as habitual unless the person, one, doesn't have anyone to perform Salat al-Janazah on his behalf, or they died in a faraway land, you found out that they passed away and nobody performed Janazah, or that person is influential in the Muslim community, and to show respect, then you make Salat al-Janazah. And both of these stipulations applied to An-Najashi when he passed away. First, he didn't have anyone to pray Salat al-Janazah on his behalf, and two, he was influential because he received the Sahaba when they migrated to Abyssinia. Any questions? Anyway.
Can several Salat Janazah can be performed?
So if a person passes away and you wanted to pray Salat al-Janazah, but you did not make it in time, so you follow the Janazah to the grave site, and after it's buried, you can perform Salat al-Janazah at the burial. After it is buried. That's okay, that's fine.
Okay. So,
Yes, Yahya.
Somebody's body is missing. You still pray.
Somebody's body is what? I'm sorry?
Missing.
I didn't hear you.
missing.
Missing.
You skip all the stuff before the prayer, and he still pray Janazah.
No, you have to wash the body even if it's missing. Yeah, exactly. All right. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking. Like, what kind of question are you asking, brother? If the body is missing, you still wash it? Or you wait for the body to come? Right? It's missing, and there's no hope to find it, then you pray Salat al-Janazah. Right? But if it's likely you'll find it, right? I mean, time period, still pray Salat al-Janazah. And then once it's found, then it is washed and it's routed, then maybe another janazah can be prayed as well. Yes, my friend.
What if a person is missing? Like you don't know if they're dead or alive?
Then you wait until it's impossible for them to be alive.
Okay.
So some scholars say you wait like, depending on their age, right? If they're like in their 50s, you wait 50 years. Any questions, ladies? Bash. As for its pillars, the pillars of Salat al-Janazah, what do you guys think? Standing, for those who are able. All of the takbirat, which are how many? How many takbirs are in Salat al-Janazah? 4. So all 4 are pillars. Reciting Surah Al-Fatiha. Okay, so that's 3. Standing when able, all the takbirat, which are 4. Reciting Surah Al-Fatiha. As-Salat ala al-Nabi, Salat al-Ibrahimiyya, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Making dua for the deceased. 5. And taslim, which is 6. Right? Standing when able, all of the takbirat, Fatiha, Salat ala Nabi. What else? Making dua for the deceased, and taslim, that's 6. And 7, I forgot, which is the order. Keeping the order. So you start with Allahu Akbar, then you recite Fatiha, then you say Allahu Akbar, then you say Salat al-Ibrahimi, and then you say Allahu Akbar, then you make dua, then you say Allahu Akbar, then you do taslim. Yes, my friend. with pleasure. And I'm glad you asked me to repeat it. Thank you. If you do not hear something, something is not clear, please ask. This class is for you. Okay? Don't be hesitant and don't be shy. They say two people do not learn. Who are they? Yeah.
Don't ask questions.
Those who don't ask questions. But why don't they ask questions? Confusion. Because they're confused?
Shy.
I'm not following you, Brother Hassan.
If I lost you at like the first second you started talking and I ain't say anything, I feel like I'm not a lost there.
So if you ask a question, what happens? What do you feel? Like, how do you feel? Like, why wouldn't you ask? Because you're lost. You're confused. But why wouldn't you ask? So they say two people do not learn: the arrogant and the shy. Right? The arrogant, you feel, who is this guy? Why would I ask him a question? Like, who does he think he is? Right? And the second person who does not learn is the one who is shy. So when it comes to learning, never be shy. So ala, to answer your question, it's actually 7, not 6. The first is standing when able. Standing when able. Second is all of the takbirat, Allahu Akbar, which is 4. 4 takbirat. That's the second pillar. Second pillar is the 4 takbirat. The third pillar is reciting Surah Al-Fatiha. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Fourth pillar is saying As-Salat ala Nabi. Okay? Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. If you say that, that's sufficient. But if you say Salat al-Ibrahimiyya, that is best. Which is Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidun Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidun Majid. That's how many? 4. How many more do we have left? 3 more. 5 is making dua for the deceased. Okay? And the best dua to make for the deceased is that has been reported that the Prophet ﷺ made. If you don't know any dua in Arabic, you can still make dua for them in English or any language you know. But it's best to learn Arabic dua so you can make for the deceased during the salah because that's the best practice. اللهم اغفر له اللهم ارحمه اللهم عافه اللهم اعف عنه اللهم اكرم نزله وسع مدخله واغسله بالماء والثلج والبرد ونقيه من الخطايا كما نقيت الثوب الابيض من الدنس, and so on and so forth. The dua that you make for the deceased is for the well-being in the hereafter. Whether it's Jannah, forgiveness of sins, whether it's ease in the grave, whether it's being pardoned, whether it's the ease of reckoning and accountability, whether it's a highest place in Jannah, being saved from the fire, being raised levels, for him to have acceptance, for his deed to not be rejected, and for his deeds to be multiplied, and so on and so forth. So that's how many? 5. Number 6 is taslim. Assalamu alaikum. Whether it's once on the right, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, or once on the right and once on the left. So 1 taslim or 2 taslims are fine. Okay? Both are recorded practices. That's how many? 6. There's one more. What is it?
Order.
Keeping the order. Keeping the aforementioned order. And if it's a man who died, you stand at his head, the one who is leading the salah. Or if it's one person making the salah, you stand at the man's head. Okay? Stand at the man's head. If it's a woman, you stand at her chest. Why? Because this is how the Prophet ﷺ did it. and the deceased body is brought to the front. So you put the deceased body between you and the Qibla. So like see how this table is? Right? So say the head is here. I would stand here. If it's a woman, I would stand here. That's simple. Yeah.
Same applies if it's at the grave.
Sorry, say that again.
Is it the same if it's at the grave?
Okay, any questions? So Salat al-Janazah, as for some of the things that are recommended during Salat al-Janazah, is to say A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim before you recite Fatiha. And even saying Dua al-Istiftah before Fatiha. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika wa tabarak ismuk. Reciting Surah al-Fatiha silently, not out loud. Making dua for yourself after you finish making dua for the deceased, for your own well-being in the hereafter, right? Raising your hands when you say Allahu Akbar, right? So when you say Allahu Akbar, you raise your hands each time. That's from the Sunnah. Okay. So to demonstrate Salat al-Janazah, you stand, you say Allahu Akbar. Recite Surah Al-Fatiha silently. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. And of course, you're not looking around like I am. I'm looking around to see it, make sure everybody's paying attention. Right? When you're doing Salat al-Janazah, you're looking down, or you're looking at the deceased, or you're looking up, forward. Right? You want to be focused. Then you say Allahu Akbar a second time. Then you say Salat al-Ibrahimiyya, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad, kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim, innaka Hamidun Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad, kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim, innaka Hamidun Majid. So if it's not the same wording that you're familiar with, there are several wordings for Salat al-Ibrahimiyya. You can say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa azwajihi wa dhurriyyatihi, kama sallaita ala Ibrahim, for example. Wa barik ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. وبارك على محمد وأزواجه وذريته كما باركت على إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. It's another wording, but any wording that you memorize is fine as long as there's Allahumma salli ala Muhammad therein. Then you say Allahu Akbar a third time, and then you start making dua for the deceased. Right? Now, if the deceased is a child, right? It's the same thing. The deceased is a stillbirth. So a child that was born not alive. Okay? If it's 4 months, if the pregnancy was 4 months or more, then the same is done. You wash the body, you shroud the body, and so on and so forth. Okay? But if it was born before 4 months, then it is just buried. No Salat al-Janazah, no washing, nothing. Alright? If the deceased is a child, you're not making dua for the child because the child is in Jannah. Right? And when I say child, I'm talking about anyone who did not reach puberty. So even if they were 14 and they didn't have, for ladies, no menstrual cycles yet, no, for guys, no wet dream, kada, there's in Jannah. So you don't make dua for the child. You make dua for the child's parents to be in Jannah with their child. Okay. After you finish making dua for the deceased, you say Allahu Akbar a fourth time. And you can make dua for yourself. You can make more dua for the deceased if you want. And then you do taslim, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, to the right. Or you can say assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah to the right and to the left. Either one taslim or two taslims. They're both fine. Alright? Any questions about that? Yeah.
Can you do Salat al-Janazah for a child that comes from a non-Muslim household?
The important The important part is the person who's deceased, was they Muslim or not? That's the important part. So for example, if a child was Muslim and that child passed away and their family are non-Muslim and they're adamant they want to bury that child as a non-Muslim. Especially here, we don't really have the authority to remove that child or that body from his family or her family. We don't have that authority. Okay? So a good practice would be to encourage their family to have that child buried as a Muslim, with kind words, with adab, with akhlaq, to the best of our ability. But if they refuse, right, we can't stop them. We want to be there to support, right? So if they have a funeral at a church, for example, we want to show some type of support some kind of way. But we still make Salat al-Janazah on the body. We request that they allow us to pray Salat al-Janazah, even if it's at the morgue. Right? At least allow us to make Salat al-Janazah. Okay? But if they don't, then we do Salat al-Janazah ala al-Ghaib, for the absentee Janazah. It's tough. My grandfather, may Allah have mercy on him, rahimahullah, accepted Islam. He said, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, very close to the time that he died. Okay? And my father was there. My father is the one that gave him the Shahada. So he urged his mother and his family to allow him to be buried as a Muslim. But they didn't allow it. Okay? So I believe he did Salat al-Janazah in the morgue. He did Salat al-Janazah. So yeah. We were planning to do zakah today, but I think, as I mentioned before, I don't want to rush through these masail because of their importance. If it means that we extend the course, or that we resume the course, even during the year, that's also fine. Okay? Because what's important is that we learn, right? Especially these topics that are everyday. They're needed. Okay? And I would encourage each of you to find some time to volunteer at a funeral home. Find some time, even if it's once. You're able to witness a body being washed, or to assist in washing a body. I encourage you, because it's a reminder of the hereafter. It's a wake-up call, as they would say. All right? After the salah is performed, the body is rushed to the cemetery. You don't want to delay washing the body nor burying the body. It should be done as quickly as possible. And I think the quickest I've seen it done here in the US is the next day. So a person dies today, they're buried at Dhuhr the next day, the following day. In Muslim countries, it happens within hours, if that. Person dies, they're taken to be washed, the washing is done, they're taken to be buried, they're buried. A couple hours, if that. And that's how it should be done. Okay? That's how it should be done. However, we don't want to ignore the rules and the laws that we have here in the US, but we want to try to rush to have the body buried. So when the after the janazah is done, we carry the body and we want to rush. But not rushing in the manner that is harmful. We may drop the body. Excuse me. The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever prays Salat al-Janazah, they will have what's called a qirat. And whoever follows the janazah until it is buried, he will have 2 qirat. So, and qirat is a large amount. That's the meaning of qirat, right? A large amount of something. So if you make janazah, Salat al-Janazah, you have a large amount of something. If you follow the janazah or the jinazah until it is buried, you have 2 large amounts of something. So they asked the Prophet ﷺ, a large amount of what? Or what is this large amount? The Prophet ﷺ said, it is the equivalent of 2 great mountains of reward, of good deeds. Because think of good deeds as you would gold and silver. Right? If you have gold, right, you pile it up, right? It's a pile of something, correct? And Yawm al-Qiyamah, our good deeds will be put on a scale. And the good deeds would be a pile. Piles of good deeds, right? Hopefully we have piles. Yeah, some people, they don't even have that. So just by praying the janazah and then following the janazah, then you have piles of good deeds. Right? The likes of 2 great mountains. As for burying, there are 2 types of holes that are to be dug. I mean, of course, in ideal situations. The best type of hole is what's called al-lahd. Lahd. Lam, ha, dal. Lahd. Lam, ha, dal. Lahd. Lahd. And lahd is to dig a hole straight down. And then at the bottom of the hole, towards the qibla. Right? The qibla side. You make a side hole. So the hole is down, and then there's like a pocket on the side. A pocket that is big enough for the body to be set inside of that hole. So down and then to the side. The body is set inside of that hole, facing the qibla. Not turned, if you can see this, not turned like this, but kind of like this. So you want to place some bricks, clay bricks, or some dirt under the head to prop the head up, and under the hips to prop the hips up. So it's not on its side like this, but kind of like this, facing the qibla, that way. Okay? Lahad is straight down and to the right, or towards the qibla. And the body is placed on its right side, facing the qibla. After you prop up the back and the head where it's facing the qibla, then you close off that hole with bricks or with dirt or with clay. You close off the hole. Right? You stack up bricks, right, to close them off. And then you put dirt in the hole. And you put enough dirt where it's sticking up like the hump of a camel. So you put enough dirt where it fills up the hole, and there's more dirt, so it's like the hump of a camel. The reason why we keep the hump of a camel, we keep that amount of dirt, is so that it is identified as a grave. Okay? It's identified as a grave. Now one may say tombstones. Tombstones are okay as long as it's not extravagant, and to make it unique or special, where it's different from the other graves. So there should be a sort of equality between graves. This doesn't mean you can't have blue or black or gray or orange or whatever. That's not what it means. But what it means is that you're not making it so extravagant that it is like absolutely different from all the other graves, where somebody would come and they would go to that grave because it looks nicer. Does that make sense? And the reason we say this is because the Prophet ﷺ, one of the things that was the last recommendations that he had before he died, ﷺ, was that you do not leave a grave unless it is equal to the graves around it. The other type of hole is what's called shaqq, which is just a straight hole that's straight down. And some people, what they do with a shaqq is they make it wide at the top, and towards the bottom it's like narrow. So it's wide, and towards the bottom it's like this, and then down. And the reason why they have that part down is so they can put like a wooden sheet over the deceased, so that the dirt is not poured directly on the deceased. And I think in Michigan they put the body in a cement box, and that cement box is covered, and then it is placed in the ground, and then dirt is put over the cement box. Yeah.
Is there mention of how deep the hole should be?
Not necessarily. It's deep enough for the body to be covered. Right? And the best is lahad, so it has to be deep enough to go down and into the side. And from my experience, even overseas, it's pretty much 6 feet, give or take. Yeah. So the height of an average man. I guess I'm shorter than average. Don't laugh. If you laugh, you messed up. It's not nice. But it's fine. You can laugh. I forgive you. Fine. Khair, inshallah. After the body is buried, it is sunnah to make dua for the deceased. Prophet ﷺ encouraged his Sahaba to make dua for a person who was deceased, and he said, ask Allah to forgive him because he is now being questioned. Ask Allah to keep him steady, meaning on his deen. Right? What happens here, and I've seen this many a time, is they would make a group dua. Right? I usually do this as well, but not because it is sunnah, but because most people, they would not stand and make dua. If there's no group dua, they would not stand and make dua. Or they don't feel comfortable making dua because they don't know dua. So I would make a group dua to remind people about this person, who he was, what he or she did for the community, and also to encourage people to make dua. But it's best for each person to make dua on their own. Because your dua is your dua. Right? You don't have to have any specific wording as long as it's from the heart. Condolences to the family of the deceased. Person dies, they have family, you want to support their family. And supporting their family does not mean you become a burden. So you go to the house and you just chill there. Right? You just sit around, do nothing. They're making you tea, they're making you food, right? They're cleaning up after you, right? You're like a bum, sitting around, like dead weight. No, that's not what you want to do. You should bring them food, right? You should, say kind words. You should show support. You should, try whatever you can to be there for them, right? Visit once, not necessarily multiple times. If it's multiple times, it should be for a reason, for a purpose, right? Make dua for them. Say kind words, right? They lost someone. Sometimes it's not even necessary for you to say anything. Just be there. And it's also sunnah to make food for them. Right? Or you can bring them fast food. Go to a restaurant, bring them some shawarmas. Right? It's fine. Get them some hanid or something. from Saba. It's okay. Make them some food. Right? Come on. Any questions? No? Right. Aywa, tfaddal.
Is there a required number for the Salat Janazah?
Say that again, please.
Is there a required number for the Salat Janazah?
One person can make Salat al-Janazah. And I'm glad you asked that. Because one of the things that are mentioned is to have 3 lines. As Prophet ﷺ has said, whoever has 3 lines, pray on him that they are forgiven. Right? So if it's, for example, 6 people or 7 people, the Imam is in front, 2 people in one line behind him, 2 people, and 2 people. That's 3 lines. And it's also not necessary for the lines to be straight in Salat al-Janazah, unlike the other salawat. Right? So you can have a bunch of people bunched together, as long as you're facing the Qibla for Salat al-Janazah. Okay. What else? Ayun.
So, is in the US, people are buried for a certain period of time. I know for some countries, for example, they, let's say, bury for 99 years, and then
They dig the grave up.
you know how it works.
I don't know. As long as the land, as far as I'm concerned, is a graveyard, it's not touched. But sometimes people purchase that land. Right? It's an old graveyard. So people purchase that land. Once they purchase that land for whatever reason, for housing development or whatnot, then they would just remove the gravesite.
So, if they do, how does it work?
Khalas. It is what it is. I mean, you're no longer physically there.
Yeah.
Your spirit, you're in the barzakh. So, Hassan.
If a Muslim was buried, let's just say we don't know the condition, they did the cleaning and all that, but they were buried surrounded by non-Muslims. Let's say the family wants to move that grave. Is it
Wants to what?
move it to, like, let's say, work with other Muslims, not grave site with other Muslims? Is that wrong? Yeah, like,
It's
pick
tough.
the grave and then move it to.
It's tough. But generally, you don't want to do that. Right? Unless there's like a cause. So like the people of Uhud, the shuhada, the sahaba, they were buried near the mountain. Okay? This happened. They were buried near the mountain. And decades later, because of the flooding in that area, their bodies became exposed. And their bodies were intact. Right? No changes. So the bodies that were exposed were moved to Baqiyah, next to Masjid al-Nabawi. So that is something that can be done, but they shouldn't be buried in a non-Muslim grave to begin with.
True.
Yeah.
Two things. So, first question, what's like the benefit of buried in a Muslim graveyard? For one, number two, I think it's a good example for everyone. Like you're saying about like equal graveyards, like talk about Masjid al-Nabawi. Over there, they have everyone. No one knows who's who. So if anyone wants to see a picture of that,
If you know, you know.
yeah.
Right. If you know the spot, you know the spot. So what's the question?
The first question,
Which is what?
like, what's the benefit of burying the Muslim gravesite?
Or the benefit of burying a Muslim gravesite?
Like over here, like
It's like having a Muslim neighbor. If you have a Muslim neighbor, he's gonna make you some food sometimes. It can remind you of salah sometimes. You know, you feel safe because he's a Muslim, right? You feel comfortable in your own skin as a Muslim. And in the grave, you know, non-Muslims, unfortunately, they're tortured. And it's likely if your neighbor is a non-Muslim that you're hearing that torture. And that's unpleasant.
Which is kind of the main reason why I was asking that is they're surrounded by non-Muslims, so it's like you said,
I'm sorry, what?
it's like what you said, they're just being.
But we don't know that for sure. That's the thing, right? Because if this person was such a good person, subhanallah, then that probably wouldn't even bother them, right? So that's why you want to try to avoid that whole, because you don't want to open a door. Any questions? Come on. So he's asking if it's a Muslim, if it's a graveyard that has Muslims and non-Muslims, how do we make dua for the Muslims, right? So the dua the Prophet ﷺ taught the Sahaba, when they would pass by a gravesite, they would say, Salamu alaikum dara qawmin muslimin wa mu'minin. Right? So you're making dua for the Muslims and the believer and the mu'mineen. So you're specifically addressing the Muslimin and the mu'mineen. So if there are non-Muslims among them, you're not really making dua for them. أنتم السابقون وإنا بكم إن شاء الله للاحقون أسأل الله لنا ولكم العافية. You have preceded us and we will be after you. We'll be your successors. I ask Allah Azza wa Jal for myself and for you. Al-afiyah. What is the meaning of afiyah?
Like,
In Morocco it means fire.
Means what?
Fire.
Yes.
Yes, in Morocco.
That's,
What is al-afiyah?
like
Well-being. Ask Allah for myself and for you to have well-being. So if in Morocco you tell somebody Allah atik al-afiyah, you're making dua against them. So be very careful. Huh?
now we know.
Oh, now you. La ilaha illallah. Yes.
Also, you mentioned that you can make like the dua as a group. Is it not considered bid'ah?
So technically it is bid'ah to make it habitual, right? To make it a habit, like it is the only way to make dua. But if you're doing it one off, so this is what happens. At the grave, most of the people that are there barely come to the masjid. Right or not? Most of the people that are at the gravesite, that come to the gravesite to watch the person being buried, most of them never come to the masjid. Almost never come. So this is their only opportunity to be exposed to a reminder. Their only opportunity to hear dua. Yes.
I heard it was like unadvised to visit the disease, like the disease grave. Why is that?
Unadvised
Yeah.
to visit the grave.
Yeah. Like the disease grave.
I'll come to that in a second. I'm glad you asked that question. I'll address that in a second. So the dua that they're hearing, this is probably the only time they'll have an opportunity for most of them to hear this dua. So you have to exercise wisdom, right? And I think a dua jama'i is good, right? But it should be made clear that I don't usually do this, right? Or made clear that it's the best way to make dua is individual, because you're saying something that you actually mean. That's what I usually do. I would make a jama'i dua and then I would encourage everyone to make dua on their own, because this is what is best. You have to exercise wisdom. As for your question, unadvised for to visit the grave. Prophet ﷺ prohibited the Sahaba from visiting the graves. And then towards the end of his nubuwwah, the Prophet ﷺ said, I had previously made it impermissible to visit the grave. Now visit it because it reminds you of the hereafter. Okay? The reason they cite the Prophet ﷺ prohibited people from visiting the graves is because there was a culture of glorifying these deceased people as if they were saints, to the point that they would worship the people in the graves. So to disconnect them from that, the Prophet ﷺ stopped them from visiting graves. The controversy that remains, however, is whether or not women are allowed to visit the graves. Does this apply to women or not? Because there's a specific prohibition for women not to visit the graves. So when the Prophet ﷺ said, فَزُورُوهَا, does this encompass women and men or just men? Right? There's a difference of opinion on this. Aisha radiallahu anha was of the opinion that it is permissible, actually recommended for women to visit the grave. The same way it's recommended for men to visit the grave. The majority of the scholars, however, say it is impermissible for women to visit the grave. Okay? In any case, if the sisters do go to the gravesite, just make sure you're not committing anything haram. You're not wailing. This is for men and women. Okay? You're not ripping your clothes. You're not indicating displeasure with Allah Azza wa Jal taking your loved one. Right? You're not mixing with the men, because a lot of times what happens, people are just bunched together, right? And it's mostly men. So when the women, get up in there with the men, there's bumping and it's uncomfortable. It's not nice. So, stay at a distance. Wallahu ta'ala. Allah knows best. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. جزاك الله.